Hello there, and welcome to the second time that we've ever done a video recording of this, which is a video, car vlog, whatever, and podcast all at the same time. Now, just in terms of, I just thought it was funny to mention initially a few things. Firstly, that at least one of the people that watched this on YouTube said that they felt that the image of you was different to what they thought would be the case. They thought that you would be wearing tweed and potentially about 10 years older. So that's one thing. So for any of you who are listening to this on the podcast, if you haven't seen what Ralph looks like yet, I mean, you're in for a treat, right? So, and I did say that out of a lot of people that I know, Ralph is possibly the least likely to wear tweed ever. But
that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, we need to be careful with these things. I think we're going to talk about this later. This is all banter, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes, we will be talking about banter. Yeah, indeed.
No, that's great.
And then the other thing as well, just to make people who are watching this realise the video, the advantages of watching this on YouTube is this is one for everyone watching. Is how many fingers am I holding up now, Ralph?
Can we move on?
Okay,
I see a lawsuit coming against Watson's Daily.
All right. Okay. So there we go.
It's not just how many fingers; it is also which finger. But
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
And then of course we've got to mention that you've got 3 of your books that you wrote behind you.
Oh, is that right? I didn't notice. Oh my God! How did that happen?
It's amazing.
That's astonishing. Not that I'm trying to plug this in any way.
No, of course. Happiness Rules by Mark Hebwood. Mark Hebwood is the pen name of Ralph Hebgen. They are one and the same person. So there you go. Right, okay, so let's banter section over. Let's talk about the... we're going to talk about 3 things today. We're going to try and keep it within half an hour to see whether we can do better than last time. So the first thing we're going to talk about is COVID, or the evolution of healthcare in the following COVID. Secondly, we're going to talk about windfall tax and how that's going, because obviously that was a very big topic of conversation this week. And the third thing, we are going to talk about banter and the potential impact of banter. So there you go. So those are the 3 things. So let's kick off with the first one in terms of the evolution of healthcare. Now, really, in terms of background and introduction, obviously, you've heard, if you've been listening to the podcast and things, or reading Watson's Daily over the last few weeks, I talk a lot about the lockdown in Shanghai and how that has had a very grave impact on the Chinese economy for the moment, but also it has had and will continue to have impact on supply chains, not just in China but internationally as well. So we will all be feeling the impacts of that. Now, with that in mind, obviously there are what this brings to mind is the ongoing impact of COVID, the outbreaks of COVID, and it really made me think about what's happening. How is that affecting our own healthcare in the UK, and how healthcare might change, and hence our topic of conversation, the evolution of healthcare, because I think that it would be fair to say, the NHS, for instance, has been overwhelmed over the last few years. It's done a great job of coping with a very difficult and horrendous situation. But the thing is, I presume that must have created a lot of backlog, and that in itself will have had an impact. But what do you think about this? What do you think about this?
Excuse me. Absolutely. Now, perhaps I lead into this with something which you shouldn't do. You should never reason by anecdote, but this is something which I'm now going to do immediately. So you know that I had a skiing accident and I hurt my knee in the process, and I will require an operation and all manner of things. And so, obviously, first of all, I tried the NHS with doing this, and any kind of consultation with the initial doctor and with the surgeon would have taken 2 months to to organize.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I'm going to go private with this, which in my case means I'm going to pay for it myself. But if I had a private health insurer, they would actually do this. Now, again, apologies for doing this. I mean, you can't generalize, and my experience isn't symptomatic of many in the NHS. But of course, generally, we do find that the NHS has been underfunded for a very long time, and is certainly not well equipped to deal with the acute crisis which COVID has generated. Within that, by the way, they've done, I think, an excellent job. But the situation now is that as we are hopefully coming out of COVID and learning to live with the disease, that there are lots of backlog operations which have to be scheduled and which are increasingly also having to be cancelled because of staff shortages. COVID may not kill you anymore as much as it used to, but clearly you are off the job market for about a week or so if you contract it. And so this has created a situation, I think, in which many will ask themselves, well, if I can't exactly count on the NHS, certainly not for the moment, then I might actually have to get my support for any medical emergency elsewhere. And this is, of course, the private health insurance sector. So I'm thinking just by stating that, we would need to expect an uptake of revenues for the PHI providers. But it's interesting to think about this maybe a little bit more and think about the next steps here, because it's not everybody who will not have PHI insurance. I mean, lots of people have this as a benefit in their remuneration packages. But there are, of course, some who don't, who maybe work for the smaller companies, SME sector, etc.
Yeah.
And then there is the large group of self-employed people who would need to pay for that themselves. And I think it's that sort of demographic, the sort of people who are caught up in the middle, who perhaps have enough money to pay for PHI insurance, but don't have it in their contract and have as yet not purchased it because they're self-employed. Those are the ones who might actually choose to have it.
No, I think that's true. And, not everyone, obviously, given the current climate, the higher food bills, fuel bills, utility bills, etc., this is yet another thing to add on top of that. But like you say, there will be people who are doing reasonably well, who've not really thought about having it, but then realising that maybe this can help them if they have if they have some kind of health issue that they want to get sorted out in the sooner rather than later. And so, I mean, we were mentioning earlier companies like Bupa, AXA and Vitality Health as being companies that may benefit from more people from different sections of society who can afford it but haven't really done it before, and there may be some kind of growth potential there.
I believe so. I wouldn't necessarily say this is a next boom sector because I've investigated this privately in some detail about 2 years ago, where I was thinking of maybe actually, well, when I left the city and therefore I didn't actually have the benefit of that particular part of my contract anymore. So I was thinking, oh, maybe I should actually do this myself now and replace that part of the benefit with going to get a Bupa in insurance. And so I looked at the entire sector, and the benefits are not cheap. So if you live in London and you wish to have access to a reasonable range of hospitals and you have benefits which are actually meaningful to you, by which I mean you don't have too much of an excess, and you have benefit including physiotherapy, etc., then the premium is easily £2,000, perhaps more, depending on the range of hospitals you wish to include. So between £2,000 and £3,000 a year is, I think, not something which is completely out of the question. And if you think about the times we live in, it might actually be that that's the sort of increase in your cost of living which you can expect to see through electricity bills and the food crisis, etc. And so all of a sudden you face the situation that perhaps including PHI increase, PHI insurance, the household expenses might go up quite easily by £4,000. And that is, of course, quite a bit. So this is quite biting. So we were still looking at a maybe slice of the population who would be able to afford that economically, and yet have not got the benefit in their remuneration package. So I'm thinking that's probably mostly going to be well-to-do self-employed people.
I mean, I also thought, I mean, in terms of this as a theme, healthcare and who might benefit or who might this affect, and was mindful of the fact that, at the moment, obviously, employers are facing pressure to increase wages and things. And, I'd say in reality, there's only so much that they can do this realistically, because you've got to, if you're going to put in a wage increase, it has to be across the board. And even small percentage increases mean large actual, involve very large sums of money. So I'm wondering whether employers will be emphasising the benefits that they get in addition to the money that they get as well, and therefore, would they either, if they haven't offered healthcare before, that they would consider it, or if they are doing healthcare already, whether they can try to increase it, in terms of make it better, so that it would be one thing that people, if people were thinking of going, the employer could say, well, look, we've got these amazing health benefits, and you may not get those in your next, at your next employer. Therefore, stay with us, that kind of thing. I wonder whether this is something that employers are going to be talking about increasingly.
I think it's a possibility, because clearly, as the cost of living crisis is not going to abate anytime soon, employers will see themselves to be subject to pressure to increase wages, increase salaries. And it is, of course, a possibility that if you find as an employer that the cost of providing an incremental benefit is less than the, let's say, 5% wage increase, which you might actually have to offer. And even that, of course, would be sadly below inflation, but there's a limit to what you can actually reasonably expect employers will offer. So anyway, if the cost of that is not as much as a possible wage increase, then that may be something which employees are going to value.
Yeah.
Because of the crisis in the NHS, which is clearly exacerbating at the moment. So that would be an interesting development, because it would be counterintuitive. Normally in times of crisis, the first thing you see going is your benefits in your package. This time it might be that some employers, maybe in the FTSE 350 type size, are willing to think about increasing the benefit package to get out of having to give an economically more expensive increase in salary.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there we go. So I think it's interesting, and one of these things to monitor, especially in mind of the fact that in China things were looking like everything was getting better, and then these things, these outbreaks just flared up. So whether we're going to see something like that in here, but anyway, right. So the next topic. Let's move on to the next thing: windfall tax. It seems to me every time at the moment oil companies do well, there's immediately talk of windfall tax. It happened the last time. It feels like only a few weeks ago, but everyone announced amazing results, etc. And it happened again. The talk of a windfall tax has come up again. So what do you think about it, Ralph?
Well, this is potentially a large topic, but let me just maybe lead in with the sentiment which I have. I find it a little bit surprising to see the reluctance on part of Boris Johnson and by extension the Conservative Party to agree to a windfall tax, to actually demand to institute a windfall tax.
Yeah.
And of course, I know the arguments against it, but the arguments against it are mostly sounding a little bit theoretical to me at the moment, and they're also all rooted in sort of financial theory, saying that investors would shy away from further investment in petroleum stocks because they might actually expect windfall tax to become a recurrent phenomenon. That's different from regular, not every year, but recurrent as in, maybe every 2 years, every 3 years, etc. And commensurately, therefore, they would shy away from an investment in the sector. But I never really particularly bought into this argument, because if you remember the tobacco industry, there was the situation of potential litigation hanging over the tobacco industry forever. And all they did, basically, they budgeted for it, and it was part of the share price. So, I mean, obviously, that's something which the oil industry would also be able to do. And second, I found it interesting to note that BP said that even with a windfall tax, they would continue to invest in the UK.
Yeah.
And may or may not have been PR. I'm inclined to believe it. And so another argument against the institution of a windfall tax goes away. So if you then weigh that against the possible benefits, well, now I'm needing to be a little bit fictional because we haven't seen it yet and we don't know what the government would use it for. But of course, in theory, you can use that windfall tax in order to redistribute the money and support households in need by subsidizing their energy bills, for example. Or you could do this in many other ways. You could, for example, advance tax breaks to the industry providing sustainable energy, wind farm construction, etc., which arguably is something that the government has subscribed to in the energy paper recently, with all but enshrining a target to be independent of Russian oil by 2030. So I think there are more arguments in favor of a windfall tax, not just from where I'm sitting, which is here, but also from the point
in front of your 3 books, of course. In front of your books.
Oh, I didn't notice.
I know 4. You've got 4 behind you.
I didn't notice that they were there. So, so not just from oh dear, not just from my point of view, but also from the point of view of how I would argue if I was a conservative politician. Because from a conservative politician's point of view, vantage point, I would expect the the benefits of a windfall tax to outweigh the potential negatives.
And I think, I have to say, I reckon it would be a crowd pleaser, really. I mean, in a way, you would have thought, I mean, given the way that the local elections have gone, I wonder how much, we'll never know though, will we? How much difference the windfall tax would have made. Because in some ways, if I was a spin doctor, I would have thought that if you got that windfall tax going, that could easily outweigh any Partygate, chat at the doorstep, talking to voters. And they'd say, well, Partygate, but it's really good that the government they're telling industry what to do, and it's going to sort out our utility bills. In a way, you could have, it could have been quite, it seems in theory it could have been quite an easy win, but obviously they decided not to do that. So,
well, have they though? I mean, certainly currently the leanings which we're getting from the Conservative Party appear to be against it. But of course, the situation is in flux, and it may well develop to such extent that we are going to see something like this. Even more so because it seems to be a viable tool within the management of an economy within the management of inflation.
Yeah.
We promise not to talk about inflation anymore because we seem to do it every time we have the podcast. But the only thing I want to mention briefly is, let's remember this is cost push inflation, not demand pull inflation. So this is not because the industry is working at excess capacity or close to capacity and can't really deal with the demand of consumers, and that's why prices go up. That's not what we're facing. We're facing inflation because the cost of production are going up. And there are basically two major tools in the economic toolkit to fight this. One is the same as for the other version of inflation, that is, unfortunately, interest rates go up, and we see that. But the other one is reduction of taxes. And so we have seen sort of mentionings of perhaps lowering VAT tax for a while. Having a windfall tax on the oil industry and redistributing that in order to support household bills would be a very similar net impact than with the reduction of VAT tax, of VAT. And so I think, well, I can talk myself into thinking that this would be a viable tool in the fight against inflation, and as you point out, also would get me some favors from the voters, which the Conservatives, after yesterday, after the results in the various by-elections and council elections, must surely know is something they need.
I mean, I think that if you actually combined that, windfall tax from the oil industry and reduction in VAT, again, I think that would be quite popular, because I think that, especially in, say, the hospitality industry, where actually lowering VAT seems to have quite a major effect on them. And so, again, maybe a combination of the two would help, but obviously we're not going to know. But it does seem that this government has a habit of floating ideas, seeing what the reaction is, and then depending on the reaction, then either implementing it or not. So
I think that's Boris Johnson's leadership style, and that's what he tends to do. I think.
And you know what? I mean, I personally don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes, I think you can't do that on absolutely everything, but there are times when I think you do need consensus, and you only really, you can have consensus with your own political group, but, how much of that is the group wanting to, they've got their own agenda versus what everyone actually thinks about it in the electorate. I think it's quite, it's quite good to judge the mood. And because I suppose, the government has to generally do what the majority of people want. So anyway, I think it's a very interesting topic. It's going to come back again, if not before, at the next set of results for the oil companies. It will just keep coming back again. So I mean, and by the next time the results, people will have had more utility bills, and they will be feeling the pinch even more. So it's only going to get tighter from here, I think.
Yes. On that, just one last comment. I've seen a report by consultancy in environmental consultancy, which predicts that if we are going to get all the investments in the sustainable sector going to plan, then by 2030 we may well be in a situation that we are going to have excess electricity in the UK. So this was something which I just wanted to share with people, with everybody, because I, for one, need some good news as well.
Yes.
Within the sorrowness which is which is out there, and that was something which I found interesting, I have to say. Although, of course, there's a caveat: we need to get this going, etc. But let's not dwell on the caveat. Let's dwell on the potential outcome, which is a positive.
Awesome. Always like a bit of positivity. So let's go on to the last thing, which is about Banter. Now, start off with the serious bit about the fact that it seems that lawsuits that include the word banter have actually increased. And the reason why I say that, if you've not been following it this week, it's all about the fact that there's an increasing trend of employees, taking their employers to court, saying sort of discrimination and things and harassment, and the employers arguing that it's banter, and what constitutes banter, what is, so what's banter, what isn't, what the effect of that is. And I mean, both you and I have worked together in the past, and we have both worked on different dealing floors, trading floors in the city, and I have seen it's literally banter fest. There is, from the moment you walk in to the moment you leave, it is just wall to wall banter, a sort of mix of banter, bullying, or not bullying necessarily, but kind of some aggressive, some less aggressive banter, and yeah, I mean it's interesting to see this. But I mean, what was your reaction to that in the increasing number of lawsuits?
Yeah, there's almost seeing another positive element here, which is coming out of left field for the legal industry, more revenues from banter-related lawsuits, which are, of course, basically discrimination lawsuits. And but to some extent, we're seeing the sort of outcome of a dynamic in our society, which is becoming more inclusive and more sensitive to these things, which is positive. But obviously, there are always the pendulum sort of swings in these ways. And currently, I think the pendulum perhaps is swinging towards its other extreme, and these kind of lawsuits are being brought more readily. I found it interesting. It's possibly a consequence of the wokeism dynamic which we're seeing increasingly taking hold of universities and other places. But I, of course, also was reminded of my work on the trading floors, and we worked on some together, as you said. And it is a difficult line to know. Well, it's difficult to know where the line is. There is bullying, and that is never acceptable under any circumstances. And then there is perhaps oversensitive reaction to banter, which may be more beholden on the individual to manage. Where the line is, I don't know. But as an anecdote, which is perhaps amusing. I mean, there are so many anecdotes. I can basically talk about this for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, but we can't. I'd say most of them aren't podcast friendly, are they?
Most of them are not to be repeated outside trading floors. Yeah. But I mean, but many of them are, because I actually found that my own experience was often that the banter was identifiable as sort of friendly banter. But I mean, I'll let you guys judge whether this is friendly or not. So basically, I was on the trading floor, and for some reason, I can't remember the circumstances, but we needed to dig in. Somebody said, guys, we need to dig in. It was held to be important to dig in. What that exactly meant, I don't know. But I was sort of walking around on the dealing floor, and the head trader, when he heard that maxim, to dig in, turned around and said to me, "Oh, Ralphie, maybe you can give us some advice on this and how to dig in. We were basically digging in the trenches, weren't you?" And I was thinking, I wasn't really digging in any trenches because I'm sort of too young for this, but maybe this is not the time to bring it up. So what I basically said to him, well, I mean, you're looking to me for advice of how to dig trenches. Well, we lost both these wars, didn't we? Everybody started smiling, and then I sort of did one better, and I said, I hope your trading cards are better than that, mate. And
this is the thing, is it's giving it back. I have to say though, Ralph.
But that was excellent. I mean, everybody was laughing. We're having a good time. So the point is, there was a tipping point. I mean, the banter was, let's say, could have been interpreted by me to be hostile. I could have been offended by it, walked off in a huff. In which case, that wouldn't have been good for me. Or I didn't really think it was negative banter anyway. I thought it was reasonably amusing. I mean, I didn't think the person was particularly witty to make that comment, but I thought it was a good opportunity for me to say something and turn the situation around.
Well, I have to say, Ralph, you know, when I worked with you all those years ago, and you know, I've you have an excellent reputation as the Archbishop of Banterbury, the High Priest of was that? But yeah, I think that it's difficult because sometimes it can be quite difficult to know where the line is.
Yes.
And sometimes also there are times when I think that it's right at the beginning, of your career. I mean, I remember what the classic for me was the coffee run, right? So what would happen is the new person coming in would be like, okay, you got to do the coffee run. So I was on the sales desk, right? So you got to do the coffee run. So what happened was I used to take the orders of the coffees. And go around to everyone and ask what they wanted and stuff. And what used to then happen was they would give me the money, but I'd keep the money. So I'm thinking, do you know what? I mean, I'm going out to get your coffee, so therefore you should pay me. So I used to give the change to the people that I liked and I knew that needed the change, and anyone else I just went, oh, there's the coffee, and that was that. And then this kind of then went on to, eventually me refusing to do people's coffees who ask for really ridiculous orders, like can I have a black Americano with a triple shot and a this, that, and I'd stop writing and going, I said, you can get that, that's a stupid order, and I don't want to get laughed at. So we'd have this kind of thing, but there was a seriousness behind the actual coffee thing, and it doesn't sound it. And at the time, you're thinking, why am I doing this? But for the sales guys, they were saying, like, if you can't get the coffee order right, how are you going to take a multi-million-pound order from a client? And so there was that, and also that. Humility or whatever, that you're not above it all. I mean, there's various ways of doing it, but like I say, sometimes it can be that, and that's purely what it is. Yeah. But then it can then morph into something more sinister, and exactly. That is what the problem is. And I think that this kind of thing, if it's increasing now when we've got a tight labour market, I think that when the economy starts to go into a downturn, we are going to see a lot more instances of these lawsuits, because people will be looking for reasons to try to get more money out of from their exit from a firm. So I suspect that there is going to be more of it.
That may well be, indeed, absolutely.
So there we go. But anyway, we'll finish there. Not quite the 30 minutes, but not too bad. But anyway, thank you very much indeed, as always, Ralph. It's always a pleasure. And please, everyone, buy Ralph's book. And also, if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to Watson's Daily. Anyway, on that note, I will leave. But thank you very much, and we'll be back again next week.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thanks, Peter, for having me. Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye.